Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil podcast. My name is Nora Engelbert. Together with Margret Jäger, I'm welcoming you to today's episode for a series on applied anthropology. Margret and I are eager to show experienced team leads, C-levels, and HR representatives the value anthropology brings to the table to help you thrive your business success. Anthropology is about a holistic view on everything that makes us human and on how we as humans perceive and interact with the world. So, anthropology is key for business fields like customer experience, doctor-patient interactions, communication, team building, the intersection of humans and technology like AI, robotics, or any customer interfaces, and for the analysis and differentiation of culture, structure, and technology in organizations and communities. Lean back, listen in, and let yourself be inspired by the stories and insights from our guests here in the Yggdrasil, under the tree of life. Hello and a warm welcome to everybody out there. Welcome to our podcast on applied anthropology, the second series of the Yggdrasil podcast. Today we have a special guest. It's Dan Podjed, a senior researcher from Slovenia and founder of the Applied Anthropology Network. Margret and I are participating in, and via this connection, this podcast became live. So Dan and Margret know each other for several years already because they are both actively supporting the European Association of Social Anthropologists, the ASA. And also for that reason, we decided that Margret, the co-host of the Yggdrasil podcast on applied anthropology, is mainly leading the interview today. So, hello, Margret. Hi, Dan.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Glad to have you both here. So, I step back now, and I'm also very happy to hear how Dan is presenting himself to you, the world out there, because I just got to know him, and he is a very interesting character and doing a lot of work on making the world a better place with anthropology. So, listen in, Dan. It's your stage.
Thank you for inviting me to this podcast and for giving me an opportunity to present my view on applied anthropology and anthropology in general, because maybe we should stop making this division between the applied and theoretical, academic. I think we should just keep working together to make, as you said, the world a better place.
Very great. I completely go with you. What we all want is building connections, right?
Yes, and this was also the idea of EASA Applied Anthropology Network, to make connections. And this is how it started in 2010. So we felt somehow disconnected, atomized applied anthropologists in Europe, and we decided to start something new. And then it happened.
It's very interesting, Dan. And I remember that we both met some years ago during an EASA network conveners meeting. And I remember not diving into it, but finding it very interesting. So can you give us a little glimpse what happened since 2010? And if you look at the homepage, there's so many activities out there. And I think people might be keen on how anthropologists, but also people who are not anthropologists, can engage within the network or see what's going on and learn from it.
So we gave this initiative to establish the Applied Anthropology Network in 2010 at the EASA conference in Maynooth, Ireland. And an anecdote from that time, we couldn't decide about the name. So for a while, the network was called Network for Applied, and then in brackets, or alternatively engaged anthropology. And somehow it stayed even on the website of EASA. So this was for some time a formal name of the network. And then we said, look, I mean, we have to go with something simpler, and we renamed it to Applied Anthropology Network. And it was not only my initiative, so it was a group of colleagues from Slovenia, particularly Professor Rajko Muršič and Professor Jaka Repić, who were with me at that conference. We all signed this letter and suggested that we start something new, which is both applied and engaged at the same time.
That's right important, because anthropology needs to get out of the ivory tower and out of the academic space where people talk among each other and even create interesting results, but don't reach the public. And it's very often the public that founds the research. So this initiatives of science communication and going outside the ivory tower are for sure very interesting.
Yeah, and so for doing that, we decided to start in 2013 our first big activity, which is still going on in the network. It's titled Why the World Needs Anthropologists. So in the first year, we were a bit suspicious about the name because it sounds a bit too high-flying, too pompous, why the world needs anthropologists. And we even added the question mark at the end. So why does the world need anthropologists? But when we deleted it quickly before the event started in Amsterdam that year, and we decided, look, it's a very straightforward, not just an answer, but a statement. This is the event which shows why the world needs anthropologists. And the purpose of the event is to highlight careers of anthropologists who did something good for the world. And we invited, for example, during all those years, speakers like Anna Kirach. She worked for Microsoft and Boeing. She was one of the speakers at the original first event in Amsterdam 2013. Then we had Genevieve Bell on the stage, who worked for Intel and is now at Australian National University. We also had Thomas Hilland Eriksson, who is, everybody knows him, at least in Europe, as somebody who is an important figure in academic anthropology. But when you talk to him, you realize, but he's also an applied anthropologist. He has done so many things in the politics, in music also. He wrote a novel, again, a little bit of a science fiction novel, and he has a voice to spread the news about the relevance of anthropology. And this is what we keep doing. So we keep inviting people that do something extraordinary, original, new. And one important thing, we tell them before they go to the stage, we tell them, please don't use the words in your speech like hermeneutics, post-structuralism, ambiguities, and so on. Why? Because we want to get as many non-anthropologists to the event as possible. And if they don't understand what's going on and what people talk about, then you lose them, The event is similar in a way as TED Talk, or it's not a typical anthropological conference. And Margaret can, I guess, confirm that. And last year, in 2023, the event was focused on the power of isolation. So we isolated anthropologists on the island of Brač. We let them stay there, listen to the talks, which were very surprising, extraordinary, in my opinion. For example, there was one prisoner there who was in prison during Gaddafi regime in 2011 in a solitary cell for half a year. Rafram Haddad is his name, and he presented his feelings of how it is to be really isolated, and talked about this important state of the world that I also describe in my recent researches. I call it crisolation. But what we did later, so we actually motivated anthropologists and other participants of the event to join the workshops, which were very physical. One of them was called, we took Donald Trump's famous quote, build the wall. So we built the wall, but the wall, a stone wall, from this dry stone that the locals do on the Dalmatian Islands. So the wall was not the symbol of division, as it is in the case of this quote of Donald Trump between Mexico and the US. This wall was actually the wall which unites people, unites anthropologists and non-anthropologists, unites the locals and people attending the conference, because this is the purpose of the event, Why the World Needs Anthropologists, bringing different people, different ideas, different approaches together. And we keep doing this, we keep innovating. And I'm happy that we are doing something original, that's something that people like. So for me, it's the most important thing, actually. We have to be innovative. I mean, we have to go beyond just the traditional academic conferences. We have to innovate. We have to go to new directions, be creative, also use the tools that are available to us, like podcasts, like TikTok, like Instagram. On one side, I of course know what are the dangers of all of these, but at the same time, we have to be aware what are the benefits of the technologies that are with us and will stay with us for quite some time.
Thank you, Dan. That's absolutely amazing. And there are so many activities out of the network, but this event, Why the World Needs Anthropologists, is absolutely outstanding. And we can just encourage our listeners to look at the homepage and engage with it and invite people outside anthropology as well and write about it.
And what I wanted to add is what I'm most proud of regarding the network, which is now 14 years old. I don't know anymore what's going on in the network. This is very important. As the founder, when I stepped down as the convener in 2018, and currently I'm not aware anymore how many activities are there going on. There's so many applied clubs, so the mentorship program is going on, the satellite events going on. So I think for me it's the biggest satisfaction that it went beyond the original idea, and that people who join the network are mainly very innovative people with very interesting ideas, which bring fresh waves to the network. So it's not just one branch of the EASA anymore. I think it's like a wave on its own. And this makes me really happy.
A wave is a wonderful symbol. I want to pick up or make one question before we go to your most current works. Is 8 years ago you wrote a text about applied anthropology in Europe, and I recommend this text highly to people who want to know what happened in the last 10 years. And I also have written an update on that. But in that text 8 years ago with your co-authors, you write that your vision is a supranational hub for co-creation. Where do we stand today in Europe, Dan, in relation to this vision?
Well, I forgot a little bit about this supranational phrase, but I mean, in a way, we got somewhere. We created this network, which is active, brings applied anthropologists together. But what we also should do is bring continental anthropologists together, not only applied, but all kinds of anthropologists together. So this is my biggest wish now when I go to the Society for Applied Anthropology conference. I think it was the 78th conference, and they have a really long tradition in the US and the North America of applying anthropology in different ways, in NGOs, in governmental sector, in companies. But we don't collaborate. I mean, when I go there, the last one was in Santa Fe this year, I think in April, and there were just a couple of us from Europe there, and also at the meetings of applied anthropology, or even at the Why the World Needs Anthropologists, this is still a European event, or mainly European event. So my biggest wish is to go beyond Europe, to bring anthropologists from different parts of the planet together. And another thing that we are doing now with my colleague Carla Guerrón-Montero, who is an anthropologist originally from Ecuador, but she works at the University of Delaware in the US, is to highlight and put in the focus anthropologists from what we call a little bit pejoratively the global south, from the southern hemisphere of this world, who are often forgotten, not invited to conferences, and we want to give them voice. And this will be also the topic of this year's Why the World Needs Anthropologists. We want to put periphery in the center, because they have really original ethnographies and anthropologists there, doing this in very different way that we do this in Slovenia, for example, in Western Europe, in the US. So we should listen to them and not consider them not to be merely informants, but instead people, scientists or practitioners who can relevantly contribute to the global anthropology, to our common project.
That sounds like a wonderful outlook for the future and especially for the next Why the World Needs Anthropologists event in October 2024.
I like it very much, Dan, what you have just said, and it reveals a lot also what I like about anthropology so much is that we are one of the disciplines at the university that are very much trained in questioning themselves, the history of the subject, the history of the methodologies, and also still we are learning and can still improve, because when I listened to you, you were also struggling like, okay, who is the center? Where is the center? And I'm very much supportive of us getting rid of this global north, global south, because we really want to connect and learn from each other, with each other, for each other. And I am also very glad that I work more and more with anthropologists from really completely different kinds of regions and get rid of that only Eurocentric view on anthropology. So that is something also in my daily business we can all bring to the table and helping people widening their horizons. So thank you for especially mentioning this topic.
And if I may add, so I think there's also not only one other when you look at the world. So it's not just one center and one periphery. So we are also in Slovenia. Slovenia is in a way a periphery of Europe, but sometimes we treat ourselves also to be in the center. We consider ourselves to be the central Europe. And what we should stop doing is to stop constantly othering somebody else, I mean, I understand the anthropology needs the other because this is our field of research, but still, I mean, we have also invited the other to join in and create the center together. Or us, we should go to whatever we consider to be the periphery, but not only to do the research there, but to do the conferences there, to write up things there, to invite those authors.
What about we learn to perceive ourselves as being the other for other people?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is why we started a new project with Carla Guerrón-Montero. So we will do the edited volume titled Why Anthropology Needs the Global South. We kept these two words, Global South, on purpose because it's a little bit provocative to show that we somehow need it to exist, and invited authors mainly from whatever the Global South is to contribute, to write. From Argentina, from India, from Papua New Guinea, and so on, to contribute their chapters to see what kind of applied anthropologies are going on these parts of the planet. So I hope something interesting will come out of this project too.
Please tell us more about current projects you're working on. And in our preparation, you mentioned about your work on crisis and isolation in Slovenia and Croatia. And we are curious to know more about this.
Yeah, so it's a 3-year research project, and in it we want to identify places which are isolated, but in the positive and negative sense, because isolation has different phases, at least 2 phases. One is solitude, which is great. So you go to the seaside in Croatia, for example, enjoy there in the so-called mobile house. And then there is loneliness. And this is what we witnessed, for example, in Petrinja. This is a town in Croatia which was devastated by an earthquake in 2020 in the December time, in Christmas time, and 2.5 years after the earthquake when we did the research there. So we realized there are still 1,300 people living in Petrinja and the surrounding villages in containers. And then we realized, oh my God, so the container is in a way the universal symbol of isolation. When you go to the seaside in Croatia and to this mobile home, this is actually container. And where people live in Petrinja, these are containers. And containers solve all problems. I mean, we imagine them to solve all problems. So, for example, you got your smartphone from a container, which came from China, right? When you throw it away, where do you throw it in? In a container. Where do you put the refugees in when they come to Slovenia and Croatia? To containers. How do you solve, where did you test for COVID, for example? I'm sure at least one time in a container. Where do you put people when they're struck by a natural disaster? In a container. So what we started to think about is how to make solutions which go beyond the containers. And what we want to do is we want to show also politicians and other decision makers what is it like to live in a container. An old woman in her 70s who lives in a container, she invited us in and said, look, I live here in this container, and I have to tell you one thing. So not one politician has ever stepped in a container in Petrinja. So we should motivate those who are decision makers to step in to see in what kind of conditions those people live. And I think this is something very applied. And if you use containers, we should design them in the way that it enables some kind of decent and humane existence. And so one thing that came out of this research on crisolation, so I call this combination of crisis, which has become a kind of permanent state in the world. So crisis is not now anymore an exceptional state, it's now a permanent state, which is now and then punctuated by normality, but short periods of normality. So the crisis has somehow overlapped with isolation. And you have also different phases of the crisis. Of course, you have the energy crisis, you have the refugee crisis, you have the economic crisis, identity crisis, moral crisis, all kinds of crises. And they overlap with different kinds of isolation, physical, also digital, economic, and so on. And this is the vicious circle. The crisolation is a vicious circle that sucks you in. And where does it suck you into? Often it sucks you in your smartphone. This is most probably the first thing that you took in your hand this morning. So 69% of people pick up their smartphone first thing in the morning. And we use smartphones in very intimate situations. For example, 10% of people approximately, and 20% of those between 18 and 34 years old, check their smartphones during sex. So this is something very intimate.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess those 10 to 20% of people are not laughing now. They might be a bit ashamed. But we take our smartphones to the toilet. 12% of people, according to one statistics, shower with their smartphone nearby. So this is why they make more these waterproof smartphones maybe. But what I wanted to say, so first thing you check this morning, so in first 5 minutes you took the smartphone in your hand after waking up, then you check on Facebook or Instagram or the news portal that you use, and what do you see? You see the crisis. The wars around the world, the economic crisis, the populism on the rise, and so on. And what do you want to do? You just want to go back to sleep, probably. And this is, again, the vicious circle of crisolation. And my latest initiative is not just to switch off the phones more often and to start talking like people face to face, but also to limit the use of smartphones among school kids. Because this is what they did in Norway, in the Netherlands, in France, and in Finland. And the results are actually great. The anxiety, according to research in Norway, went really down, particularly of girls. Bullying went really quickly down. In 1 year, it went down by almost 50%. And I think here we need anthropologists too to explain what is a humane way of communicating to one another, why we need face-to-face interaction, why the school breaks are perhaps more important part of the school than actual learning from books and so on. Because in school you meet your friends, your friends for life, and if you keep looking at the smartphone, you will not meet them. And so I described all of this in these 2 books that I've just published. The title is Crisolation. So I also consider this to be an applied project. And 2 books are because one is science and another one is fiction. And I described in the fiction, in the novel, the world where we keep looking at screens all the time. So it's a dystopian novel about a multi-apartment building with different families and individuals living in their apartments, and they're locked in. They don't know why, what happened outside, something happened. And they have drawers where somebody pushes them the food that they order in, and they can push the garbage out. And the screens are the windows. So the windows are actually screens. So instead of looking out, they look at the digital images that show the image of the outside reality. And this is what we do. I mean, we spend on average 8 to 9 hours per day in front of screens. So what is on the screen has become hyper real in a way, more real than the physical reality, more important than the physical reality. And this is something, in my opinion, radically new.
Thank you, Dan. That's really, really interesting and make probably not only me, but also our listeners thinking a lot. And you managed to show both projects in like one row and also talk about the products you have already produced, right? And you just told us that the books are written in Slovenian, but there might be translations out there into other languages soon, which is also amazing. You show explicitly strong what applied anthropology or what anthropology can do for the world, for all of us. And as anthropologists, of course, we believe in this and we try to live that. But if I ask you for one conclusion, so why the world needs anthropologists and why the world needs anthropology, what do you answer?
One thing is, of course, as I said at the beginning, to make the world a better place. So this is our duty. And another thing we often forget is to have fun. This sounds really strange, but I think we have started to take our project and project of anthropology too seriously. I see it often at the conferences, of course you're deeply involved in the topic. I am too, in the topic of crisolation and so on, but we should also enjoy it, have fun, because I think the missing face of the science in total, not just of anthropology as a part of social sciences and humanities. Like there was this one missing book of Aristotle's Poetica, if you remember, and the book was about the comedy and humor. And I think we should find again this missing book about humor, about the fun, and add it to our shelf to show how fun the things we do are, how interesting, because we do the most interesting things in the world. Come on, I mean, we deal with humans, with their sexuality, with religion, with global problems, and with the global communications and so on. And so this is what people like to read about. So let's give them more of that.
Thank you so much, Dan. I believe that is now the best ending I have ever had in a podcast. And to all our listeners, I completely encourage you, yes, have fun, go out, don't only look at the crisis of the world, of course it is there, but there's always something blossoming and some fun in the situations and the interaction we gain from building connections. And Dan, thank you so much for having been here today in this podcast. And what I take from you now, also your last sentence on the fun part, is maybe a little to say anthropologists are building connections between worlds, breaking up the containers, bringing in the sun, the light, the fun. But also what I take is that you're saying, and the scientists, anthropology themselves can learn to open the container and do the connection with the real world and the fun. So that is what I take from today. Margaret, the last word to you.
That was a wonderful conclusion from the conclusion, Nora. Thank you very much for doing that. And thank you very much, Dan, for being our guest. It was a pleasure to have you with us and showing our listeners more about why the network Applied Anthropology exists and what's going on, and also about your super interesting work that you're doing with so many different projects.
This podcast is produced in collaboration with the Applied Anthropology Network of the European Association of Social Anthropologists. Thank you for listening in and being with us today. If you wish to learn more about us or our guests, please check on the ICTRA-Space website, www.ictra-space.org/en, or contact us directly via info@ictra-space.org. We are happy to answer your questions and to hear your thoughts on the value anthropology has or could have for your daily work. Looking forward to sitting with you again next episode in the ICTRA space under the Tree of Life.